Meanwhile, thousands of demonstrators took to the streets across France on Saturday, believe it or not, to protest against President Emmanuel Macron's latest measures to push people to get vaccinated to curb the rising cases of the Delta variant. Our next report gets you all the details from France.
Over 100,000 people marched across France Saturday to protest against President Emmanuel Macron's plans to force the vaccination of health workers and require a COVID-19 vaccine certificate or negative test to gain entry to bars, restaurants, and movie theaters. Demonstrators say Macron's sweeping measures announced this week to fight a surge in COVID infections infringe on their freedom of choice.
Vaccinations are really about individual freedom. Everyone can choose. That's not the theme here today. The theme is about the absence of freedom that is unfortunately continuing to grow in this country. That's it. They're taking away our freedoms little by little. Vaccinated or not, we are all together.
One demonstrator in Paris was seen dressed as the Statue of Liberty. Some signs read, "No to the health passports." Macron's announcement had already prompted demonstrations earlier this week in Paris, where police had fired tear gas to disperse some protesters. Marches across the country also included Yellow Vest protesters seeking to revive the anti-government movement curbed by coronavirus lockdowns. Earlier on Saturday, the office of Prime Minister Jean Castex said France would reinforce restrictions on unvaccinated travelers from a series of countries to fight the surge of COVID infections. The average number of new infections in France has rebounded to reach nearly 11,000 per day.
Elsewhere, thousands of protesters took to the streets of France on Saturday to demonstrate against a compulsory vaccination rule for healthcare workers. Some 160,000 people protested against a bill that will require everyone to have a special virus pass to enter restaurants and mandating COVID-19 vaccinations for workers in some selected professions. The pass attests that the holder has either been fully vaccinated, has tested negative over the previous 24 hours, or has recovered from COVID in the last 6 months. The new measure was announced last week by President Emmanuel Macron in a bid to boost vaccinations as the country battles a surge in coronavirus cases fueled by the highly contagious Delta variant.
Alors je n'ai pas envie que ma fille ait une injection qui fasse que ça puisse dérégler son cycle menstruel. Donc je n'ai pas confiance dans un vaccin parce que je sais qu'il peut y avoir des conséquences fâcheuses. Nous sommes encore dans les essais cliniques, donc nous ne savons pas si à moyen ou à long terme nous aurons des effets indésirables, que ce soit sur les adultes d'ailleurs ou les enfants ou les adolescents.
French anti-riot police fired tear gas as brief clashes erupted when protesters reached the Champs-Élysées and the Gare Saint-Lazare railway station. Across France, protests were planned in cities including Marseille, Montpellier, Nantes, and Toulouse. French lawmakers are due to vote this weekend on this COVID health pass bill. Meanwhile, in Italy, thousands of demonstrators gathered in Rome and several other Italian cities to protest against government's requirement of a so-called Green Pass, an extension of the European Union's digital COVID certificate to enter many venues. Prime Minister Mario Draghi's government approved a decree on Thursday ordering the use of green passes starting from August the 6th. These passes will allow access to gyms, museums, movie theaters, and the inside of restaurants and other public venues.
Sono qui perché non voglio il Green Pass, perché voglio essere libera di scegliere quello che voglio e non voglio fare.
Hundreds of anti-COVID protesters also staged demonstrations in London on Saturday against what they describe as an erosion of their civil liberties. Demonstrators say UK government's track and trace app is limiting their movements, with more than 600,000 told to self-isolate to prevent further COVID spread. The protests come a week after most coronavirus restrictions in England were lifted. Meanwhile, in Greece, police used tear gas and water cannon to disperse protesters in central Athens, demonstrating against COVID-19 vaccinations. Groups of protesters fired petrol bombs at riot police as they marched near the parliament. Saturday's demonstration was the third in 10 days, which has been prompted by a government decision to impose mandatory inoculations for healthcare workers.